Oh, okay, we're live, apparently. Welcome everyone. We have the chess finals today, and we have six amazing players. And we will first play round robin matches, and then we will have the finals among the best two. So I will just leave very quickly the players to introduce themselves, and maybe alphabetical order by first name. And then at 5:20, like in 8 minutes, we are starting the matches. So let's see. Alexander, are you the first?
Yeah, I'm here. My name is Alexander. Originally, I'm from Russia, Moscow. Now I'm in Finland. So yeah, you want to have some fun
I'm from India, but
today.
now I'm a student. At
I guess that's it from my side.
Okay, I'm Grzegorz. I'm originally from Poland, Warsaw, Poland. I lived abroad for almost 20 years now. For the last 4 years, I live in London. I'm with DeepMind, and I essentially was supposed to be a commentator, but given that there was an odd number of players, I stepped in. So you can kick my ass. Don't worry, I'm no match for any of you. But just will be 5 is the way to go.
Thank you for joining, Gregors. Okay, so who's next? Quickly.
Okay, maybe
Where is
yes.
Alvaro? Alvaro, is he not in the call anymore? Okay, maybe not. Raphael, you can go.
I am from Armenia. I went to chess school and participated in national tournaments for 2 years when I was 12 to 14 years old. I don't play chess now, and the quality of my game has dropped a lot during this time, but I hope I can play today well. Good luck to all of us. Thank you.
Okay, Maciek, did you introduce yourself?
My name is Maciej Jeske. I'm from Krakow, from Jagiellonian University. I'm a PhD student. I also work at Informatica. I play chess since I was about 5, 6. I won several times Championship of Poland under some age, and I think that's all.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. Ugo, do we have Ugo in the call? Okay, maybe not. So we are starting at in 5 minutes. And yeah, I will just switch quickly to the other call with the commentator. So you will get ready to start in 5 minutes. So please stay in the call so that we can see you in the other call with the commentators. Good luck. I'll see you in a bit.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So Bogdan, did you see the new tournament? They kept canceling it.
One sec. I see a tournament here, just finals, 4 rounds.
No, it should be 5 rounds.
Oh,
I
cancelled.
just sent you now in chat the new link. Okay, so I think we are now live for the tournament, and we are here with Bogdan Burlaku, and he will be commentating the matches. So let's see. So we still have 4 minutes until the matches start. So maybe Bogdan, maybe you could introduce yourself a bit for the people.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm also a chess amateur. Used to play competitive chess a few years back. I'm a FIDE master. And it's my pleasure to be here today to provide some commentary for your EML finals.
Thank you very much for joining us. So, and I'm hoping that you will also be able to teach us something, because we are really, most of us are really beginners. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I'm taking lessons myself from a grandmaster twice a week.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But I've been doing, I've been studying chess since I was 8 years old with, going to the chess club, studying books and solving puzzles and all that. So I know a thing or two, and I can probably give a few pointers, like the XKCD comic.
So what's your favorite opening? Do you play the same opening all the time, or do you change openings?
Well, recently I've been trying to diversify my repertoire, let's say, but I don't really have time to study chess seriously nowadays. Opening theory requires a lot of memorization and remembering lines up to move 20 or something like that. So I just try to play principled chess and to surprise my opponent. It's always a thing with competitive chess. So when you play in a chess league or in a tournament, that people do home preparation against each other. For example, if you look my name up in a chess database, you'll probably find a lot of games from, I don't know, from even the early 2000s until now. And you will know what I prefer to play, like the Sicilian opening with black, or the King's Indian defense, or the Spanish with white.
Okay.
And you can use a computer to look up the best lines against me. And at the same time, I will do the same to try to prepare against you. So when you play in a tournament, you usually know beforehand who your next opponent will be. And it's always a kind of game of trying to catch the other in your preparation while avoiding their own preparation. And so I play a lot of weird stuff just to avoid a theoretical battle. Because sometimes, even if you're like the high-rated player, you can have 100 or 200 or more points on your opponent. But if they know the opening much better and they catch in some opening trap, then you're just losing. And yeah, precious ELO points.
Okay, so I think we made a small mistake, and we are not live on our page, but we will be hopefully. So the matches should start now, I think, because it's 4:20.
Well, there's no running games yet, but it starts in 40 seconds according to the timer here.
Okay.
So if we're not live, I have to reintroduce myself.
Yeah. Just now I realized that we didn't put the link on the homepage.
Should I also say like what I studied and stuff like that, or my background, or just?
But the matches will start just now, so I'm not sure how much time. But yeah, we can chat a bit.
Okay, so we have more or less 2 high-rated players in the list, and then a more heterogeneous field of 4 players that will try to swindle each other.
So are we seeing one of the matches? Can you open one of the matches?
Yeah. We have. They haven't started just yet.
Oh, they haven't?
We have 3 running
games. Are they
games.
aware that this started?
I'm just going to open all 3 of them so I can switch.
Okay, so some are playing. Okay.
And they are starting right now.
Okay.
I think we have to wait a little bit for Gregor to
No. Gregor is playing.
Yeah, but he hasn't made the first move.
Oh.
So we're just going to have a look at the second game. They already started. This is called the Spanish defense.
Okay.
And Black is playing rather conservatively so far, but it's a totally normal position. So basically in chess, like in every sport, you have to be very careful to defend yourself at all times, to keep your pieces coordinated, to mind your king's safety. And usually the opening is the time when you just develop and try to achieve some kind of harmony between your pieces. So both players are just doing developing moves right now. And White has gone for this exchange in the hopes probably to grab the c5 pawn, which is more or less not working, because had Black taken with the bishop, then this pawn on e4 would also have been hanging from the two pieces. But as it is now, Black has just won a pawn. White has just won a pawn in this position. And Black has just considered a second pawn, which White is more than happy to take. So they're playing 10 minutes, but it looks like they're very, very fast. This game is already kind of decided in White's favor.
Oh, really? Okay.
I mean, normally with 2 pawns up, it would be an easy win, but of course, we have to keep in mind that it's always very difficult to convert a win, and there's still a lot of pieces on the board, so White is going for a fork right now, and let's see what's happening next. To win, but of course, we have to keep in mind that...
Okay, I think now we are live. So just so you know, finally we did
now we're live,
everything.
and,
Sorry everyone for the delay. We've been having small technical issues, but the matches are well ongoing, and we are here with Bogdan Burlacu, who will be commentating the matches. So Bogdan, please introduce yourself briefly, and then we can go back to the matches.
Yeah, thank you. Hello everyone. So my name is Bogdan. I'm a chess player. I used to play competitively, but now I just play seasonally in some chess leagues. I'm also FIDE master, and I would like to offer my experience today to comment the EML finals. So we have 3 ongoing games. The first one is pretty interesting, that both players are just developing and nothing really significant happened yet. The position is rather equal. So in the meanwhile, let's have a look at the other 2 games where things started happening very early on. So let's see here, the third game between Alvaro 21 and Raphael Darbinian, if I'm pronouncing this correctly. This also looks like an equal position where White is probably going to try at some point to exchange this bishop and then developing the remaining pieces, this bishop here, by pushing probably a pawn. And Black will just try at some point to castle the king and then start playing in the center. This is what we call the close game, because no pawns were exchanged in the center, and whoa, that's a fairly brave attempt to open up the position. I was just going to say that the position is closed because the pawns are fixed in the center, but White immediately tries to blow up the center via tactical means. So he's probably hoping of getting some I don't know, some attack going really fast, but unfortunately he just sacrificed a piece and he doesn't really...
Was that a mistake, or was that a bigger plan that I'm not understanding?
No, it was part of a swindle, probably an attempt to trick black into giving away their queen. So,
Okay.
for example, the white knight was here, and had black taken this bishop, then the knight would have gone and forked the queen.
Right.
But as it stands now, white just gave away the piece, black just took it. And normally when you try tactics against the enemy king, you have to make sure that you have enough pieces to support your operation, let's say. And in this case, white has only 3 pieces, but black also has 1, 2 pieces, the pawn here protecting the bishop. So he's not really in any kind of danger. White can now try to pick up a pawn on f7, in the idea that if black takes with the king, white will mate on a6, but
Okay.
I can just take it with my other piece, with the queen, and then nothing will happen. So in this position, more or less, white is in big trouble because he has 1 less piece on the board. So let's see what happens in the second game that we have. Black started with some Spanish game in which, unfortunately, they let go of some pawns early on, and now white is just dominating, it seems, and already has a piece up. So this game is already more or less decided, or almost decided. You can see that white has all of the pieces in the attack, and black's king is stuck in the center and doesn't really have good prospects of running away, because the way on the king side is blocked by the bishop, and of course white controls these 2 files in the center. So I expect this will be sort of a mate shortly, like knight d5, knight takes f6. And we're going to see a mate on the board soon. Black has to play bishop e6. White will probably go here. Then we'll pick up this bishop. And black escapes mate, but loses even more material. So now white just has to defend everything, and they should be very happy with 2 extra pieces and a lot of pawns. So let's have a look at the first game again.
Okay, so this is with Gregor. So just if it wasn't clear earlier, so Gregor just joined today the finals, just because one person could not join anymore in the finals. So Gregor, who is a colleague in DeepMind, he kindly he was supposed to be the commentator today, but he kindly offered to play, such that we have even numbers. So yeah.
Yeah. So here it looks like white is in a bit of trouble because they are missing 1 pawn, and also their pieces are not very coordinated. We can see that the rook in the corner and the knight and also this bishop are really not doing much. At the same time, black's pieces are just dominating on this c file, on this diagonal. This is a very strong square for the knight to be on. So we're looking at some very good chances for black in this position. So at this point, black probably decided that the safest way to win is just to pick up material and exchange pieces. So now he's just taking this knight. White has to take with the rook, because otherwise, if the pawn is taking, this bishop is hanging on c2.
Right.
And then black will just grab another pawn. And he's just like, I'm just gonna get some pawns. I'm gonna go to the end game and slowly promote, grind the win out of this position. So the more pieces are exchanged, the less chances you have to create complications. So the side which is at a disadvantage usually has to go for some active defense or complicated positions, because otherwise it's just more or less an algorithmic win for black in this position. I have this file, I'm just going to go and exchange pieces on it, and then I'm just going to try to bring my king to the center and promote my pawns. So this is quite a technical win for black at this point. So unsurprisingly, the second game, where black was already mated, like about to be mated a few moves back, ended in mate for white. And let's see what's happening in the last game. In this position, it looks like black is winning here. I'm just going to go real quick to see what happened in this position. Ah, yes. So black eventually managed to keep the piece, and yeah, it's just an easy win, because with an extra piece in this kind of simplified late middle game, yeah, black is just going to bring the king and use the bishop to force white's king back, and then pick up all the pawns. That's kind of the plan here. So the trick here is that usually when it's king against king with pawns on each side, you have to mind something called the opposition, where the kings stand against each other and block each other's path to their own pawns. But when a bishop is present on the board, the bishop can, of course, create lots of tempe for black, which means that white at some point will be put into some kind of we call it Zugzwang in chess terms. It means that you don't have...
There's no move that is not wrong, that is not in your disadvantage, or that is that
yeah, I'm forcing you to take a step back, because I'm blocking every other possible path for you. So that's the plan here. Black just has to bring the king, and probably has to do something to make a path for the king here on this side, because this side is blocked. You see this kind of pawn structure where all the pawns are blocked, leaves no space for the king to go. To kind of penetrate the enemy camp. So black has to think about a way to open up some paths on the king side, so on this side of the board. It's an interesting endgame, and it requires a little bit of technique. You have to think about where you want to place your pieces. With black, for example, the bishop might be better off on something like this diagonal to keep white's king in check. And then black will want to try to push some pawns to create some spaces for their own king, because we can see that white's pawns at this point just make some kind of blockade, not allowing the black king to move forward. So this is a bit of a slow and technical endgame, so I think we can afford to have a look at the other games. This is a mistake, actually, because white's best chance of making a draw in this endgame is to sit still But this pawn push, apart from the fact that it just kind of gives away a pawn, you are going to take the h-pawn, but you are going to have two doubled pawns that have absolutely no chance of promoting because the bishop is controlling the promotion square here. But you've just given black a lot of squares to bring their king forward and to push this pawn. So here you will be pushed back, no matter what you do. So you see already black is taking advantage of these spaces and moving forward. That is to say, it's not entirely super simple right now. White can still try to keep this king kind of blockading on the white squares, but it's not sustainable long term. Black just has to waste some time with the bishop to make the king go back. The king can't go forward because then this pawn is free to run and become a queen or some other piece. So when white moves back, black will just take the opposition and force white's king to move back. Okay, in the meantime, let's see what happened here. This was also very fast to develop from a relatively from a not so easy endgame to a one position. Let's see what happened here. Yeah, what happened is just that black picked another pawn. Now here there was a trick. White presumably thought they can grab this pawn, but the problem is that then, because the bishop is pinned on this second rank, black will be able to, for example, move like this, or even like this, and this bishop is indefensible. So it will be captured in the next move, and black will increase their advantage. So what happened afterwards is that probably these two pawns started running, and it's a very easy game to just push the pawns and promote on the queen side. Okay, so two decided games and one interesting endgame, where actually black kind of went astray a little bit. Let's see what happened in this position. Yeah, so here black rushed with f3, giving away the pawn, which was not a very good idea because this pawn was basically free to promote later on. And after giving away the pawn, black wanted to pick up white's pawns because they thought, or they got scared that this pawn posed some kind of danger, although the bishop is blocking them, and went away with the king, allowing white to move towards black's pawns. So white now should try to just race towards black's pawns. So this is probably not so easy anymore for black. Yeah, so unfortunately black managed to spoil their position, and now white is winning. So the mistake was to allow the white king to go like this and pick up black's pawns. Oh, but it was a time.
Oh, so that's a draw?
Yeah, unfortunately white ran out of time, so it's a draw. But yeah, so black has had a technically winning endgame with a piece up, but they got greedy and tried to pick up these pawns, neglecting their own pawns, and then they became lost because white had too many pawns. But in the end, it was a draw because white ran out of time. So I would say this were some interesting first games. Especially this endgame was interesting because it's not so easy when the position is blocked to exploit your extra piece. And as we have seen, it's also easy to make mistakes.
Yeah, especially when time runs out. Yeah, that's
Yeah, and you have to have some intuition about this kind of endgame. Otherwise, if you're trying to calculate everything on the spot, it's not so easy to do it.
I think the second round already started. Is that?
Yeah. So now we have already. So I'm just going to go really quickly on.
Maybe we don't have to go from the beginning. Maybe we can just go with, or I don't know, as you think it's better to.
Yeah, just to know what's going on here. So black played a very aggressive opening, and is going for complications right from the start. They are developing quickly on the king side because obviously you cannot take immediately this knight, because then when the bishop takes, your king and your rook will be forked. But it's not so easy because black basically sacrificed the pawn for initiative. And although this looks rather menacing with this bishop and this knight here, there are not really a lot of good squares for this knight to go. I can try to pick up this pawn maybe, but in this position actually the number of pawns doesn't matter that much. What matters is speed of development. And here black is very developed on this side, and also is threatening to take this pawn. So it's a very dynamic and very interesting game so far. So let's see what happened. White correctly decided that they have to keep developing. And they managed to reach some kind of dynamic equilibrium in this position. Both players managed to develop their pieces, and they will probably go for castling next to put their kings into safety. And then it's just going to have to be kind of more longer and strategical battle.
Well, I do have to say that these are the two players, the highest ranked, so...
Yeah, the best players, and black played a very tactical, very aggressive opening, where it's probably very easy to go astray unless you know the theory. So black was probably prepared or played this opening before. And white is trying to lay back and play safe moves. This move is trying to exchange queens. It's also baiting black into a little trap, because now if black tries to exchange the queens on f1, white has this intermediate move, capturing the bishop on e6 with check, because the bishop is now protected by the queen, but if the queen moves, the bishop is left unprotected. And then, of course, white will win a full piece. So this is a very clever and tricky move. On one hand, I'm laying a trap, and on the other hand, white is thinking that exchanging queens is more or less a good thing, because black has kind of this awkward pawn here on e4. This pawn is called an isolated pawn because it's not close to any other pawns that can protect it, potentially. So when some pieces get exchanged and some endgame becomes possible, for example, white in just 2 moves with the king will get close to this pawn and threaten to capture it. Now another very tricky move from black, also relying on tactics from white, relying on the fact that all these pieces are kind of depending on each other for protection. So you can't really move any of them without leaving the other one unprotected. And now the trick is that this knight is seemingly unprotected here, but if black captures it, then there is this sequence. White takes the queen on h3, black has to take the queen with their own bishop back, and then this rook is open to be captured by the other bishop. So it's a very clever little trick. Forcing black to defend with the only move rook d7. The rook has to move because it was being attacked, but at the same time it has to keep protecting this bishop on d6. So that's why rook d7 was the only move here. And now white is probably thinking, okay, I have the bishop pair, which normally is considered a little bit better than knight and bishop or 2 knights. The position is fairly open. And he's just going to try to improve their position slowly. So maybe put some rook on e1, checking this pawn, and maybe some bishop on f4, and try to play the endgame. As I said, white has a slightly better pawn structure because their own pawns are only 2 groups, easier to protect, while black's pawns form three groups, and especially this one is not so easy to defend. So I'm seeing here that the other game's already finished, or actually it's the previous round. I think this will be a longer endgame, where white has an advantage, but it's not so easy to convert, so we can have a look at the other games in the meanwhile and see what's going on there. Let's see the second game between Raphael and Gregor. What's going on here? Basically, it seems like white managed to clean up all the pawns, all of black's pawns on the king side. So black is up 2 pawns, white is up 2 pawns, and additionally black's king is not so safe here in the center with the 2 rooks looking at it very menacingly. So this again, it should be an easy to convert win for white. White now wants to bring a knight and give this check and keep black's king from running away to the side. So if I give this check with the knight, black's king will have to go back to the c file being exposed to discover checks from the rook, and now it's more or less over because the next move from white will just give this discover check and capture 1 rook. So black resigned in this position. It was really very hopeless for black. Okay, so let's now have a look at the third game between...
So they all finished? Oh no, there's
the third game just finished as well.
Going. Oh, did it?
I'm not sure what happened, but I believe Alvaro lost.
Right, Alvaro, yes, but there's still the one ongoing, Maciek and Alexander.
Yes, there's still one going, one going in,
yeah.
So we're going to have a look here. Black cleverly tried to put the bishop here to protect the pawn, like this.
Mhm.
So the bishop and the pawn are protecting each other. But on the other hand, this is kind of a passive setup where you're just creating a defensive structure that doesn't do really anything else. And now, unfortunately, black went away with the rook back on d8, which left the king with too few squares available. So you see this bishop is controlling the diagonal.
All right.
And then white saw that the other diagonal really checks the king with very little chances to avoid. So black now is forced to go back with the bishop, but this at the end will leave this pawn unprotected. It's a clever move to actually move with the knight here because black is probably thinking that I'm going to exchange these minor pieces and give away this pawn, but on the other hand, we're going to end up in a opposite colored bishops endgame. Of course, with rooks on the board, which gives white an advantage, but it's always opposite colored bishops is one of the endgames that is really hard to win because the two bishops really can't do anything against each other. So if I put all my pawns on the color of my bishop and the opponent puts their pawns on the color of their bishop, then there's nothing anyone can do to progress the position. So for these reasons, white avoids to exchange. So white is thinking, I don't want the pawn, I want to keep the bishops on the board and create more threats. Now he's simply looking at this pawn, but it's not so easy to find a good way to protect these two pawns here on the king side. So here white has a big advantage actually, because all of these pawns from black are weak. The pieces are not very coordinated. They are just barely trying to create some defensive barrier against this very menacing pair of bishops. And white is simply extremely well coordinated, and his pieces are close to being on the optimal squares. Now, for example, I can already think of some tactics, grabbing this pawn, taking the knight. But it's probably just easier to keep pressuring black by just improving the position, probably pushing some pawns, bringing the king forward. And it's kind of difficult to play for black, even from a psychological perspective, because you're always on the defensive and you're always kind of boxed in. And it's not really characteristic for people to kind of endure this passive defense for a very large number of moves. So you always have this tendency to try to play active, but this usually means creating more weaknesses in your position. So here white is trying to grab squares for his pieces by pushing this pawn on c5 to give an outpost for the bishop on d6. And black is trying to enforce this defensive barrier here by playing h5 to protect the knight. So white sees that there's not much that they can do here because black put a lot of effort to protect this side of the board, but there is still progress to be made on the queen side, because white has a majority of pawns. White 4 versus 3 has this very strong bishop on d6, and this bishop always looking towards the queen side on this diagonal. The knight will not stand here forever. So it's just a matter of playing calmly and picking up pawns. Black played e3 here with the hope of some tactics, because by playing e3, he was attacking this pawn on d5 from two sides, from the bishop and from the pawn. But on the other hand, it allowed white to control a lot of the squares in the center. So I can bring my king like this, put it in the center. I can even try with my rooks to assault the king. And I can try to take control of these files here. It's an interesting endgame, so let's see what will happen. Actually, black managed to get some counterplay here. So I think with the remaining time, 2 minutes for each player, it's not so easy anymore. White still has the advantage, but in limited time, it's not so easy to see the right way to win here. The point of this move was to open the B file for white, because he will try to bring the rook, check this king, and then capture b7. But black, of course, is careful. So these players are really very good, and they are acknowledging each other's threats. So we can say that black will not go down easily. Probably now a good defensive resource is to bring the rook around. But it's very tricky. You have to be mindful of these discovered checks on the side. So actually rook b7 doesn't work, because bishop a5, discovered check, the king has to go on d7, and then this pawn would have forked the two pieces. So black decides to go for some exchanges. And white now will probably have to go and protect that rook. So here, there are kind of two factors that favor white. One is that this pawn will be free to run towards the promotion square at some point. And the other factor is that black's king is actually more vulnerable in this position, not by much. And black was right to try to exchange some pieces, but yeah, it's being cut off and less active than the other king. So now white is trying, just like I said, to run with this pawn. This was not a very fortunate move, because now the rook is vulnerable on c4. Black will have to push this pawn at some point to clear this diagonal to control the promoting square with his bishop. The other alternative is to sacrifice the bishop for the pawn, which actually white allowed in this position. So earlier on, before giving this check, black could have taken the pawn directly, because if white takes bishop, then rook takes the other bishop. As it stands now, black seems to have missed the chances to block the pawn. So because this pawn would have promoted in a few moves, the only available alternative was to just give the bishop for this pawn and try now to hold with these with the rook and the few pawns that black has. And here's a nice trick from white with this check. But unfortunately, okay. Black hurried with pushing this pawn and gave it away, and now it's very easy for white to capture all the pawns and promote this other d-pawn. So it was kind of a swindle in the endgame. We can say that black kind of managed to escape the very grim situation after the middle game with some chances in the endgame when the rooks were doubled on the h-file. But after that, white played very well and seized every opportunity to create more chances to win by trying to run with this pawn on the other side of the board, by putting a lot of pressure on black's king. And in the end, due to some inaccuracies in the endgame, black wasn't able to hold. He wasn't able to stop this pawn. He wasn't able to then kind of keep some kind of blockade against white's pieces. But both players displayed very good technique, and they both have a keen eye for tactics. As we've seen, there were a lot of tricks in the middle game and a lot of traps. So it was a very, very interesting game and very good play from both players. Now I'm seeing that
the weird situation. Yeah, I think chess.com does not allow us to play 5 rounds, 5 Swiss rounds with 6 players only. So it seems like this is the last round.
Okay, let's see what happens now. We have the 3 games. I'm just going to load them up, all 3. So in the first game right now, it's just normal play. This is called the Closed Sicilian because white is not pushing d4 and exchanging, but just trying to keep a more closed pawn structure with the pawn on d3 and this kind of typical chain of pawns and this front here. But when white plays this kind of opening, which is considered to be less ambitious play, usually black has no chances, no trouble to equalize. So here we see it's just a very equal position where yeah, there are equal chances, and so far nothing really out of the ordinary is happening. Usually in this kind of position, white wants to play on the king side because here is where I have like most of my pieces, and black wants to play on the center or on the queen side. But here white is trying some very aggressive plan. The point is to sacrifice this pawn on f5, but to try to open up the position for the other pieces to come. So to try to mount some kind of king side attack. I think for a blitz game or for this kind of 10-minute time control, this is a good tactic. And I mean, normally the game will become very tactical in a few moves, and you have to be very careful about protecting all your pieces and not letting anything hanging. And in this kind of complicated position, I would guess that Maciej is more into familiar territory. But of course, this is what we call a critical moment in the game, where black has to make a decision. How do I continue? Do I just take on f5 and allow white to grab this pawn on d5? do I take on f5 and then calculate all these other potential lines like takes. It looks like I can't make moves on board, but yeah, so basically this is a moment where you really have to stop and think with black, for example, how to continue. And of course you can't do nothing because right now fork is being threatened between knight and bishop. Okay, so I guess we can have a look until black decides what to do at the other two games.
Okay.
Here it looks like we have an equal position with let's see, actually it doesn't really look equal to me. If I'm counting correctly, white has an extra piece on the board.
It seems like, yes.
Yeah, so it's not very equal at all.
Is the analysis engine wrong, or what is the...
Yeah, I think this here is not correct. So white has an extra piece and an extra pawn, so this should be quite easy for white. I just have to be careful not to give away any of my pieces. But it should be kind of straightforward, nothing special to win this game. I mean, you can always try to be very, very technical, but generally the solution is to just exchange pieces until you have the extra piece in the king endgame, for example. And this is a tactic that always works at any level. So this game is more or less decided. Let's see what's happening in the third game. So here also white has an extra piece. And this pawn is also hanging. And black is trying to fork here with the knight between this rook and this bishop and the king. So let's see what white decides to do here. It might be just easy to either move the king away, and then when this... So the king moves here, protects the bishop, and then when the knight comes here, I'm just moving the rook. Another option would be to try to exchange pieces, because, as I said, I'm a piece up. That's always a valid strategy. I can just play bishop e2, exchanging, and then I'm not worried about giving this pawn because I'm up an extra piece. And it's more than enough material to win. And I can also grab this pawn on d6 at the end. White plays a3, which is kind of a weird move. White probably thought that even if he gives away the exchange, so a rook for a knight, he still has more than enough pieces to maintain a solid advantage, because usually two pieces are considered better than one rook. And he has these two pawns here in the center. So this pawn can just basically start to roll towards the promotion square, and there's very little black can do about it. My two bishops control a large amount of squares. The rook controls this c-file. The knight prevents any rook from black from challenging control of the c-file. Now this bishop here is actually not on a good square because it's just vulnerable and it will get captured. So actually this really looks like an easy win for white as well. But here a little bit more technical, it would be not to exchange but to play b3 and try to bring another pawn in the center. So this is actually a nice move. a technical move. And now I can just start to push the pawn, probably. Or even better, I can put the bishop on c7, kind of protecting this promotion square and then pushing the pawn. Let's see what white decides to do in this position. And while white is thinking, let's also have a look at the original game. So black decided to take on f5, and white decided to go also on this side to take on f5 and not to capture on d5. So there was a critical moment here where white could have gone in this direction, which might have been actually the better alternative. But white was just trying to mount a kingside attack here. So that's why he went with knight f4. And this kind of position where both players are still developing. There is one extra pawn from black, but at this point it's not really critical yet. Black wants to play in the center and get some counterattack, and white wants to play on the kingside and try to create some threats to the black king. So this is an interesting position. Black decided to give the bishop because he thought that this bishop is not contributing too much in this position. And by exchanging, he's simplifying his job a little bit of defending, and he's also bringing the other pieces in play. So I think white's best chance here is to try to create some complications with bishop h3. Otherwise, if he allows one more move for black to go unchallenged, it will become quite difficult. The queen is already a little bit awkwardly placed because it's looking at this rook on e8, and there's not much space to move away from this column. But queen f4 is also an interesting move, actually. Black is trying to grab some space and create some squares for the knight here on g4, protected by the pawn. And then at some point, he will probably try to place a knight on e3. So again, just like before, you see, he has a very good eye for the vulnerable squares in the opponent's position. So we've seen in the previous endgame that he placed the bishop on d6, protected by the pawn on c5, which is a very strong piece. And now he's looking to do the same with one of the knights on e3, protected by this d4 pawn. But it's still not easy. Not an easy position to play for black, even with the extra pawn, because black is on the defensive, and he has to weather a few threats from white before he can be safe and he can try to convert this extra pawn. Now this b3 move I don't like because it's a waste of time. Here in this position, time is critical for white because white is one pawn down. He has to be active and he has to try to create threats. b3 is protecting against some c4 push, but black never intended to do that in the first place. Like I said, black wants to just go and take control of this square on e3. So this is already becoming quite difficult for white. Another disadvantage of this b3 move is that before I could think of some pawn pushes that would strengthen the position of my knight on d5 in the center, but with this pawn on b3, this pawn can never be pushed again because it will not be protected by the pawn like before. So again, the fact that white decides to exchange queens here tells us that he lost the thread of this position and didn't know what to do anymore. At least here he might try to exchange and then protect everything with rook e2. Unfortunately, after this sequence, c4 doesn't work because if I take and you take the piece on e3 with your rook, then this pawn is very dangerous and will run, the pawn on c3 will run towards c1 and promote. And it's very hard to stop it. So this has become a very, very difficult position for white, if not hopeless already. So white decides to just leave the c2 pawn because it's very difficult to protect. There's no question that he hasn't seen that this pawn is hanging, but it's just so difficult to find a good move to protect it. So now the position is more or less decided. Black has 2 pawns and a very active position. White is still trying to activate their pieces. So he was hoping that after this exchange, the rook will become active on the e7 rank. But black, of course, doesn't want that and is not allowing this exchange. And the problem is that the rook is still hanging, so I cannot just take on f5. I have to waste another move to play with the rook. And yeah, this allows black more time to coordinate. Let's have a quick look what's happening in the other games, or what happened in the other games, because they're already finished. So Sisu Mis won against Alvaro. Yeah, so it was just a Spanish game where actually, yeah, black lost a piece here, and then it was just cruising for white with an extra figure, just exchanging and yeah, and grabbing more material until mate. So yeah, and then in this game, let's see what happened. Another mate. Yeah, another position where black just lost a piece after this sequence of moves, and then it was probably very difficult to do anything. Okay, so white has 7 seconds left. Very difficult defense in this position with a few pawns down. He's hoping to reach again some opposite colored bishops endgame after knight takes d2, but black again is not allowing this. So black is always very technical and kind of like you know, AlphaGo and Lila Chess Zero. They are just trying to keep it simple, not trying to win by a very large margin, but trying to achieve a guaranteed win. So playing very safe and very technical chess. Okay, so all the games are finished now.
Right. So I think this, yeah. So I think there should be the the ranking. So we have Maciek first, and then Sisumi second, and Raphael third. Are you seeing this ranking? That
Yeah, that's the correct ranking.
Yeah. So we will probably just continue, and now we'll continue with the first two, with Maciek and Sisumis, and then they will challenge each other. Right? Is this how we play now?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to some very interesting games in the final, because these two already had an extremely interesting game, in my opinion. Let me just have a quick look. Maybe I can follow them on chess.com to try to follow their game.
So I don't think they started.
I think maybe they would like a short break.
Yeah, so let's just take a break, 10 minutes break, and then we will be back with the final matches.